Family vanished on a 1999 road trip. 18 years later, a drone uncovered something disturbing. The shimmer of heat rose from the Arizona highway like ghostly fingers reaching for the sky. Just off Route 66, an abandoned Ford Explorer sat baking under the merciless desert sun. The vehicle appeared frozen in time, camping chairs still arranged in a perfect semicircle, food warming on a portable stove, family photos displayed neatly on the dashboard. A half-completed travel journal rested open on the passenger seat. The last entry dated July 17, 1999. The Chambers family, John, Sarah, and their two children, Emma and Tyler, had simply vanished into the vast, unforgiving desert, leaving everything behind. No footprints leading away from the campsite. No signs of struggle. No evidence of foul play. 4 lives erased without a trace in what would become one of the Southwest's most baffling unsolved mysteries. Before we dive into this mystery, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you think happened. Your opinion could be the key to understanding this story. Just 3 days before their disappearance, the Chambers were the picture of American suburban bliss. John, a civil engineer with a passion for photography, had meticulously planned their cross-country road trip for months. Sarah, a high school biology teacher, had packed educational materials to turn their journey through national parks into learning experiences. 15-year-old Emma filled journals with sketches of landmarks they'd visited, while 11-year-old Tyler collected rocks from each state they passed through. They were the family everyone wanted to be, recalled Linda Peterson, their next-door neighbor in Springfield, Illinois. The night before they left, they hosted a barbecue in their backyard. Sarah made her famous potato salad. John was grilling and telling jokes. The kids were excited about seeing the Grand Canyon. There was absolutely nothing to suggest they were in any kind of trouble. Surveillance footage from a gas station in Flagstaff captured the family just 4 hours before their estimated disappearance. The video shows John filling their tank while Sarah purchases snacks inside. Emma and Tyler are visible in the back seat, laughing as they play a travel game. Their movements are casual, relaxed, showing no signs of distress or fear. What happened in those next 4 hours that would cause an entire family to disappear without a trace? The initial search operation was extensive. Helicopter sweeps, ground teams with cadaver dogs, infrared imaging. For 2 weeks, over 100 volunteers combed through 50 square miles of harsh desert terrain. Nothing was found, not a shred of clothing, not a dropped possession, not a single body. It was as if they'd been plucked from the earth by some force, said Sheriff Robert Tanner, who led the initial investigation. In 30 years of law enforcement, I've never seen anything like it. People don't just vanish into thin air. But the Chambers family did. And for 18 years, their case collected dust in the county archives. Just another unsolved mystery in a region known for swallowing travelers whole. What if they never intended to disappear? What if something they witnessed forced them into hiding? Or perhaps something more sinister was at play? The truth remained buried beneath the shifting sands of the Arizona desert. Until 2017, when a routine environmental drone survey captured something that would break this case wide open and expose secrets some had killed to protect. But what exactly did that drone see? The summer of 1999 in Copper Canyon, Arizona was one of the hottest on record. Temperatures regularly climbed above 110 degrees, the kind of heat that distorts reality and tests the limits of human endurance. It was against this hellish backdrop that the search for the Chambers family gradually lost momentum, like a dying heartbeat in the vast silence of the desert. Before we continue, if you're finding this story as compelling as I do, please hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps bring more of these unsolved mysteries to light. Detective Maria Reyes was assigned as lead investigator, a rising star in the department with an uncanny ability to find patterns where others saw chaos. Her sister, Catherine Monroe, now a journalist, watched as the case slowly consumed her. Maria would come home with sand in her hair, Her skin burnt from hours in the desert, Catherine recalled. She'd cover her walls with photos, timelines, maps. She barely ate or slept. This family haunted her. The investigation sparked national attention. For 3 weeks, the Chambers family dominated headlines. Psychics offered visions of underground bunkers and alien abductions. Conspiracy theorists pointed to government testing grounds nearby. Locals whispered about the hungry desert, ancient tribal lands said to occasionally claim souls who trespassed on sacred sites. But Maria pursued more tangible leads. Bank records showed no unusual withdrawals before the trip. John's employer confirmed he was expected back the following Monday. The children were registered for the upcoming school year. Cell phone records showed their phones went dead simultaneously at 2:17 p.m. on that July afternoon, their last ping coming from a remote sector near Thunder Canyon, an area not on their planned route. It makes no sense that they'd deviate so far from the main highways, Maria explained in her final press conference. That area isn't on any tourist maps. There's nothing out there but protected tribal land and abandoned mining operations. The most disturbing evidence came 6 weeks after the disappearance. A hiker found John's camera half buried in sand nearly 12 miles from where their vehicle was discovered. The memory card was intact, containing hundreds of vacation photos, landscapes, family poses at landmarks, snapshots of roadside attractions. The final image showed nothing but a distant plume of dust rising from behind a ridge. What was beyond that ridge? What created that dust cloud? The investigation team never found out. After 8 months, with resources drained and no new leads, the case went cold. Maria Reyes requested a transfer to another department, her confidence shattered by the one puzzle she couldn't solve. Something broke in her, Catherine would later say. It wasn't just professional failure. She became convinced there were people who didn't want this family found. For 18 years, the Chambers case faded into local legend, a cautionary tale parents told teenagers about venturing into the desert unprepared. The abandoned Ford Explorer was eventually claimed by John's brother and sold. The search area was reclaimed by drifting sands and resilient desert vegetation, until 2017, when a technological eye in the sky would capture what human eyes had missed for nearly 2 decades. But how had the family remained hidden in plain sight for so long? And who had helped them disappear? Catherine Monroe stared at the email in her inbox, the cursor hovering over the attachment labeled Drone Survey Footage, Sector 7. At 45, she was no longer the young reporter who had watched her sister's career implode over the Chambers case. Years at the Copper Canyon Chronicle had etched fine lines around her eyes and threaded silver through her dark hair. But time hadn't dulled her instincts. Something about this anonymous tip made her pulse quicken in a way it hadn't in years. If you're enjoying this deep dive into this unsolved mystery, take a moment to like and subscribe. Your engagement helps support in-depth investigations like this one. I knew it would be you who'd receive this, the message read. Some secrets can't stay buried in the desert forever. Catherine's office walls were covered with framed articles, 2 decades of local stories, municipal corruption exposés, and profiles of desert characters. But there was one story she had never written: how the Chambers case destroyed her sister. Maria had never recovered professionally or personally from her failure to solve the disappearance. Now living in Tucson, she refused to discuss the case, and the sisters' once close relationship had deteriorated into awkward holiday phone calls. I have a photographic memory, Catherine explained to her editor, Frank, as she pulled up the drone footage. I remember every detail of every case file Maria brought home, every testimony, every inconsistency. I've carried this family in my head for 18 years. The drone footage had been taken by Enviroscope, an environmental research company conducting vegetation pattern studies in the desert. The footage showed typical desert landscape until frame 0.42, when the camera panned over what appeared to be natural rock formations. But Catherine immediately spotted the anomaly. A perfect rectangular shadow beneath an overhanging cliff, too geometric to be natural. "Someone built something out there," she whispered, zooming in on the screen. "Something designed to be invisible from ground level." Frank leaned against her desk, concern etched across his weathered face. "You know what happened to your sister when she went down this rabbit hole?" "The sheriff's department, the town council. Nobody wants this case reopened." "Because they never wanted it solved in the first place," Catherine replied, her voice hardening. "I've always known that." The truth was, Catherine had suspected official interference in the investigation since 1999. Strange inconsistencies had troubled her. Witness statements that changed overnight. Search areas abruptly declared off-limits. Evidence that disappeared from the case files. Her sister had noticed, too, before her psychological breakdown and subsequent resignation. Later that evening, as Catherine drove home along the dusty roads of Copper Canyon, the setting sun painted the desert in shades of blood orange and deep purple. She pulled over at Thunder Ridge Overlook, a spot offering a panoramic view of the valley where the Chambers family had vanished. In the distance, she could just make out the location where the drone had captured its curious footage. Her phone rang. The screen displayed "Unknown Caller." "Is this Catherine Monroe?" a man's voice asked, the connection crackling with static. "Yes, who's this?" "Someone who knows what your sister found before they shut her down." The voice was tense, wary. "That drone footage you received? It's just the tip of the iceberg. The Chambers family didn't disappear. They were made to disappear." The line went dead, leaving Catherine staring at the darkening desert, her mind racing with possibilities both terrifying and vindicating. Was she ready to pursue the truth that had destroyed her sister's career? And was the town of Copper Canyon ready for what that truth might reveal? The Enviroscope Research Facility sat on the outskirts of Tucson, a sleek, modern building incongruous against the ancient desert landscape. Dr. Nate Wilson, the environmental scientist who had been operating the drone that day, fidgeted with his pen as he replayed the footage for Catherine. His nervous energy filled the sterile conference room. If you're finding yourself pulled into this mystery, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing these untold stories to light. "I wasn't supposed to be surveying that quadrant," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was classified as tribal land, restricted for cultural preservation. But the wind that day pushed the drone off course, and that's when we captured this." The high-definition footage showed what Catherine had already seen, the rectangular shadow beneath the cliff face. But Dr. Wilson enhanced the image, applying thermal imaging filters that hadn't been included in the anonymous email. Suddenly, the screen revealed a complex heat signature. Cool blue lines running beneath the desert floor, in patterns too regular to be natural. "Those are water pipes," he explained. "An irrigation system running at least 30 feet underground. Someone's been diverting water from the aquifer to this location for years. Whoever built this went to extraordinary lengths to hide it." Catherine leaned closer. "Could this support human habitation?" "Absolutely. The system is sophisticated. It collects rainwater during monsoon season, filters it through these chambers here, and redistributes it. Whoever designed this understood desert ecology at an expert level, what appeared on satellite. Imagery as barren wasteland was actually a carefully disguised compound with multiple underground chambers and a sustainable water system, the perfect place to disappear. Catherine felt a chill despite the building's efficient air conditioning. Why hasn't Enviroscope reported this to authorities? Dr. Wilson's gaze dropped to his hands. "We did. I filed the report with Sheriff Blackwood personally. He thanked me, took the coordinates, and told me they'd investigate." His voice hardened. 3 days later, our company received a cease and desist letter claiming we'd violated protected tribal lands. Our permits for the entire region were revoked. When I tried to follow up with the sheriff, I was told the matter was closed. Outside the research facility, the desert wind carried the scent of creosote and dust. Catherine sat in her car, processing what she'd learned. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Sheriff Blackwood was Deputy Blackwood in 1999. He was one of the last people to see the Chambers family alive. The pieces were starting to connect. The current sheriff had been involved in the original investigation, a detail her sister Maria had never mentioned. Why? What had Deputy Blackwood seen or done that day that needed to be buried for 18 years? That evening, Catherine drove to the county records office, using her press credentials to access the original Chambers investigation files. What she found, or rather, what she didn't find, confirmed her worst suspicions. The case files had been sanitized. Key witness statements were missing. Search grid maps had been altered. The entire section dealing with Deputy Blackwood's role in the initial search had been removed. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide the truth, not just about where the Chambers family had gone, but about why they had disappeared in the first place. As Catherine walked to her car in the darkened parking lot, she noticed a piece of paper tucked beneath her windshield wiper. Written in block letters were the words, "The Chambers saw something they shouldn't have. So did your sister. Stop now." The message was clear, but for Catherine, there was no turning back. Whatever had broken her sister would not break her. But who was watching her now? And how far would they go to keep the desert's secrets buried? Catherine's Jeep kicked up dust as she drove down Copper Canyon's main street. The small desert town hadn't changed much in decades. The same faded storefronts, the same diner where locals gathered to exchange gossip over coffee strong enough to strip paint. But today, Catherine noticed something different. The way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, how gazes slid away from hers, the subtle closing of ranks. If you've been following along with this investigation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your theories in the comments below. Her first stop was the Tribal Liaison Office, where she hoped to gain permission to visit the area where the compound had been spotted. Jackson Redwater, the liaison officer, was a man in his 60s with deep lines etched into his weathered face. His office walls displayed maps of tribal lands intermingled with photographs of ancient petroglyphs. "That area is restricted," he said flatly, not even looking at the coordinates she'd provided. "Cultural significance, no exceptions. Even for a possible missing persons case?" Catherine pressed. Redwater's dark eyes finally met hers. "Especially for that. Some places are not meant to be disturbed, Ms. Monroe. The Chambers case brought enough outsiders trampling across sacred land." Something in his tone made Catherine pause. "You sound like you knew them." A flicker of emotion crossed his face before vanishing. "I knew of them, like everyone else here." He stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "The desert keeps its own counsel, Ms. Monroe. You'd do well to respect that." Outside, Catherine made notes on her phone when a shadow fell across her screen. Sheriff Blackwood stood before her, tall, imposing, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. In 18 years, he'd transformed from an eager deputy into a man whose authority seemed to expand beyond his official role. "Heard you've been asking questions about an old case," he said, voice casual but eyes watchful. "Dredging up painful history for a lot of folks around here." "Just doing my job, Sheriff. The same as you." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "That drone footage you received? It's nothing but an old mining outpost. Already checked it out myself." He leaned closer. "Your sister knew when to walk away. Maybe take a page from her book." As Blackwood strode away, Catherine felt eyes on her from the diner across the street. Through the window, she spotted Ellie Martinez, the waitress who'd served the Chambers family their last known meal. Catherine had read her statement in Maria's case notes before it mysteriously vanished from official records. Inside the diner, the conversation died as Catherine slid into a booth. Ellie approached cautiously, coffee pot in hand. "Haven't seen you in here for years," Ellie said, her voice barely audible. "Not since your sister." I need to talk to you about the statement you gave in '99, Catherine said quietly. About what the Chambers family told you? Ellie's hand trembled, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the mug's rim. I can't. I have kids now. A life here. Her eyes darted to the window, where Blackwood's cruiser lingered at the curb. Some things are better left in the past. As Catherine left the diner, her phone rang. David Chen, her former high school classmate, now running a successful tech company in Phoenix. I heard you're looking into the Chambers case again, he said without preamble. I have information, but not over the phone. Meet me at the old water tower tonight at 8. Come alone. The sun was setting as Catherine drove home, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. In her rearview mirror, a black SUV appeared, following at a discreet distance. It stayed with her for miles before turning off onto a dirt road. That evening, as she prepared to meet David, Catherine discovered her home office had been searched. Subtle signs that someone had rifled through her notes and computer files. Nothing was taken, but the message was clear. She was being watched. What forces were aligning against her investigation? And what was David Chen, who'd never shown interest in the case before, suddenly so eager to share? The old water tower stood like a sentinel on the outskirts of town, its rusted frame silhouetted against the starlit sky. Catherine parked her jeep a quarter-mile away and approached on foot. Senses heightened to every sound in the desert night. The whisper of wind through creosote bushes, the distant yip of coyotes. David Chen's Tesla was already there, incongruous against the desolate landscape. Before we continue unraveling this mystery, please take a second to like and subscribe if you're finding this story as haunting as I do. David hadn't changed much since high school. Still slender, still intense, though success had given him an air of confidence he'd lacked as a teenager. He paced nervously beside his car, checking his watch every few seconds. I've been carrying this for 18 years, he said without greeting, pressing a USB drive into Catherine's palm. I should have given it to your sister back then, but I was scared. Given her what? Catherine asked, closing her fingers around the small device. I was interning at the county clerk's office that summer. Filing mostly. I saw things. Documents that came through about chemical testing in the Thunder Canyon area. Soil samples showing contamination levels way beyond legal limits. His words tumbled out in a rush. Then the Chambers disappeared, and suddenly those reports vanished too. But I'd made copies. Just teenagers' curiosity, you know? Then people started asking questions about who had accessed those files. Catherine felt her pulse quicken. What kind of contamination? Industrial waste, heavy metals, PCBs, the kind of stuff that causes cancer clusters, birth defects, the kind of stuff that a civil engineer like John Chambers would recognize as dangerous. David's eyes darted to the darkness beyond the tower. There's more. 2 days before they disappeared, John Chambers came to the clerk's office. He asked to see environmental impact reports for the entire Thunder Canyon area. Back in her home office, Catherine plugged in the USB drive with trembling hands. It contained hundreds of scanned documents, government reports, internal memos, chemical analyses, all pointing to a massive cover-up of illegal toxic dumping by Meridian Mining Corporation. The company had been disposing of hazardous waste in abandoned mine shafts throughout the region, the same region where the Chambers family had vanished. The final document made Catherine's blood run cold. A memo from the sheriff's department to Meridian Mining, dated 1 day before the Chambers' disappearance. Tourist family accessing restricted area. Situation being monitored. The next morning, Catherine drove to the county courthouse to examine her sister's original case notes, hoping to find connections to what David had revealed. The records clerk, a woman who had worked there for decades, regarded Catherine with wary recognition. Your sister's case files were checked out 2 weeks ago, she said, not meeting Catherine's eyes. By whom? Sheriff Blackwood. He never returned them. Returning to her car, Catherine found an envelope on the driver's seat. though she was certain she'd locked the doors. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping from the Copper Canyon Chronicle, dated 1 week before the Chambers disappeared. The classified section had been circled in red pen, with one particular ad highlighted, Emma's Photography Exhibition, Capturing Nature's Secrets, July 16th. There had never been a photography exhibition. Emma Chambers was 15 years old and had never published her photos. This was a coded message. But to whom? And why was someone sharing it with Catherine now? At home, Catherine spread everything across her dining room table. David's documents, the classified ad, her own notes. A pattern was emerging. The Chambers family hadn't simply vanished. They had stumbled onto something dangerous and tried to warn someone. Then they'd either fled or been forced into hiding. Her doorbell rang. On her porch stood Jackson Redwater, the tribal liaison who had refused to help her days earlier. His expression was grave. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. "Something the desert has kept hidden for 18 years. Was Redwater finally ready to break the wall of silence? And why now, when Catherine was getting closer to the truth? The desert dawn painted the landscape in watercolor hues as Catherine's Jeep followed Jackson Redwater's truck deep into tribal lands. They had been driving for nearly an hour, far beyond cell service, following unmarked dirt roads that sometimes disappeared altogether beneath drifting sand. If you're captivated by the twists in this investigation, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into America's unsolved mysteries. "My people have been stewards of this land for thousands of years," Redwater said, breaking the silence as they finally stopped near a cluster of ancient petroglyphs. "We know its secrets, which ones to keep, and which ones must eventually come to light." From his pocket, he produced a folded square of paper, a page torn from a teenage girl's journal. The handwriting was neat, methodical. "Dad says we can't trust the authorities. Mom is scared. Tyler doesn't understand why we can't go home. Someone is watching the house. If you find this, tell Catherine Monroe at the newspaper. She'll know what to do." Catherine stared at the paper, her hands trembling. "This is from Emma Chambers. Where did you get this?" "My nephew found it tucked inside a crevice near these petroglyphs 18 years ago." The girl had been leaving messages in different locations across the reservation, always in places tourists wouldn't go, but where someone who knew the land might find them. "Why are you showing me this now?" Redwater's weathered face remained impassive. "Because the drone found what we've been protecting. And because the corporation that poisoned our water is back, filing new permits for the old mining areas." He led Catherine to a narrow fissure in the rock face and motioned for her to follow. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically. The beam from Redwater's flashlight illuminated more petroglyphs, ancient handprints, spirals, animal figures. But there, scratched more recently into the soft sandstone, was a series of numbers and letters. "Coordinates," Catherine whispered, recognizing the format immediately. "And a date, July 20th, 1999, 3 days after they disappeared." "The girl came here after they went into hiding," Redwater confirmed. "Left messages for weeks before they moved on. My people found them, understood they were running from something dangerous. We chose to help them disappear. It's an old skill of ours, hiding those who need protection." Back in town, Catherine spent hours decoding Emma's classified ads. Each week, for 6 months before their disappearance, the Chambers family had placed cryptic messages in the newspaper. Seemingly innocent announcements about garage sales, lost pets, or community events. But when arranged chronologically, they formed a disturbing narrative. The family had discovered evidence of environmental crimes and were documenting them. They had approached authorities only to find some were complicit. They had begun receiving threats. The final ad, published 2 days before they vanished. "Found. Truth beneath Thunder Canyon. Will share with interested parties. Last chance." Catherine's investigation took her to the newspaper's archives, where she found something even more startling. Emma Chambers hadn't just placed classified ads, she'd submitted an actual photograph for the paper's annual Capture the Canyon contest. The photo showed a distant ridge with what appeared to be trucks unloading large containers near a mine entrance. The caption read, "Nature's Secrets: What Happens When No One Is Watching." The photo had never been published. According to the submission records, it had been pulled at the last minute by the editor, Frank Jenkins, Catherine's current boss. When confronted, Frank's face crumpled with long-held guilt. The sheriff's department came to me, said it was a matter of public safety. I didn't know what it meant back then. I just did what I was told. That evening, Catherine received another anonymous text. The messages weren't just in the paper. Check the library's copy of Desert Ecology by S.J. Tanner, Emma's favorite book. At the library, Catherine found the book, its margins filled with tiny, meticulous notes in Emma's handwriting, documenting times, dates, license plate numbers of trucks entering the restricted area, and one final chilling entry. They know we know. Dad says we have to disappear tonight. If anyone finds this, the evidence is hidden where the water flows beneath the stone. Catherine now understood what had happened to the Chambers family. But the bigger question remained. Were they still alive? And if so, where had they been hiding for 18 years? Catherine stared at the list of names she'd compiled. Ordinary citizens of Copper Canyon who had been quietly, systematically helping the Chambers family remain hidden. The town librarian who had set aside ecology books with hidden messages. The pharmacy owner who had ordered unusual quantities of allergy medications matching Sarah Chambers' prescriptions but sent to remote drop points. The mechanic who specialized in modifying vehicles to be untraceable. If you're finding this investigation as compelling as I do, please like and subscribe to support our continued work uncovering America's hidden stories. It wasn't just a few people, Catherine explained to her editor, Frank, who now seemed eager to make amends for his role in suppressing Emma's photograph years ago. It was an entire network, people who believed the Chambers family and chose to protect them rather than the corporation that was poisoning their land. She spread photos across Frank's desk, surveillance. Footage she'd gathered showing the same delivery. Truck making monthly journeys to the edge of tribal lands, returning empty. Receipts for bulk purchases of supplies that would sustain a family living off-grid. Bank records showing small but regular withdrawals from a dozen different accounts. Just enough to avoid detection, but together adding up to significant support. They created a modern underground railroad, Frank whispered, the implications dawning on him. Right under our noses, Catherine nodded. And my sister suspected it. In her personal notes, the ones that never made it into official reports, she mentioned a conspiracy of silence in the town. She thought it was about the toxic dumping. She never realized it was actually people protecting the family from those responsible for the dumping. That afternoon, Catherine visited Eleanor Whitman, an elderly woman who had been the town's postmaster in 1999. Now retired, Eleanor lived in a small house filled with desert plants and Native American pottery. She offered Catherine tea in a handmade clay cup. "I knew you'd come eventually," Eleanor said, her eyes sharp despite her years. "You have your sister's determination." "You helped them," Catherine stated, not a question. Eleanor nodded slowly. "John Chambers came to me the day before they disappeared. Showed me photographs of men in hazmat suits dumping barrels into the old mining shafts. Said he'd gone to the sheriff and been threatened. He asked if I could help get a package to the EPA in Phoenix without it being traced back to him." She paused, her gaze distant with memory. "I did more than that. I helped them plan their exit." "Were you part of some organized resistance to Meridian mining?" "Not then, but we became organized afterward. People in this town have been dying of strange cancers for years, clusters that match the toxic exposure patterns from those dumps. The company paid off officials, buried reports. Some of us decided if the law wouldn't protect us, we'd protect ourselves, and anyone brave enough to stand up to them. As dusk fell, Catherine drove to Thunder Canyon, parking at the public overlook. Using binoculars, she studied the landscape where the drone had spotted the hidden compound. The desert revealed nothing to the naked eye, just brush, rock formations, and the occasional cactus. But Catherine now knew what to look for: the slightly greener patch of vegetation in an otherwise arid zone, the rock formation too symmetrical to be natural, the subtle signs of human presence, visible only to those who knew they were there. Her phone rang. Dr. Nate Wilson from Enviroscope. "I've been fired," he said without preamble, his voice tight with stress. "My research has been confiscated. They're claiming I falsified the drone footage." "Who's claiming that?" Meridian Mining's lawyers contacted the university that funds our research. They've threatened to pull millions in grant money if this gets out. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone broke into my apartment last night. They took everything related to the Thunder Canyon survey." "Where are you now?" Catherine asked, suddenly concerned. "Leaving town. I've sent everything I have to your encrypted email, including something I didn't show you before. Footage from a second drone that captured a brief image of someone outside the compound entrance." He paused. "Catherine, it was a teenage girl, or rather, a woman now who would have been a teenager then. Emma Chambers. Alive." As Catherine drove home, she noticed a black SUV following her. The same one she'd spotted days earlier. This time she took a deliberate detour, leading her pursuer to the busy parking lot of the town's only grocery store. She parked, waited, and watched as the SUV pulled in several spaces away. A man stepped out, not Sheriff Blackwood as she'd expected, but David Chen, the tech entrepreneur who had given her the USB drive. Why was David following her? And what wasn't he telling her about his connection to the Chambers family? The Phoenix airport hummed with early morning activity as Catherine scanned the departure board. Dr. Nate Wilson's hasty exit from Copper Canyon had left more questions than answers. According to the ticket information he'd texted her, he was boarding a flight to Seattle in 30 minutes. She had to catch him before he disappeared. If you're following this investigation and want to see where it leads, please take a moment to like and subscribe for updates on this and other unsolved mysteries. Catherine spotted him at the gate, disheveled, unshaven, a far cry from the composed scientist she'd met at the research facility. When he saw her approaching, his eyes widened with panic. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, glancing nervously around the terminal. "They're watching." "Who's watching, Nate? Meridian Mining? The sheriff's department?" "Both. Neither." His hands trembled as he clutched his boarding pass. "There's something I didn't tell you about the drone survey. It wasn't just environmental mapping. We were contracted to locate underground water sources for a new development project. Meridian Mining is planning to reopen the old mines, claiming they've developed clean extraction technology. But they're using the new project to cover up the old contamination," Catherine finished, the pieces clicking into place. Nate nodded. "The compound we discovered, it's directly above one of the most toxic dumping sites. I think the Chambers family has been monitoring the contamination all these years, documenting its spread through the groundwater." He pulled out his phone, showing Catherine a complex map of underground water flows. "See these patterns? The irrigation system we detected isn't just for sustaining life in the desert. It's a sophisticated filtration network. Someone's been cleaning the water, containing the toxins from spreading to the aquifer that supplies the town's drinking water. The Chambers family has been protecting the town that hid them," Catherine whispered, the realization washing over her. "There's more." Nate's voice dropped further. "I found records of environmental lawsuits filed against Meridian in other states, class action suits from communities with cancer clusters. The lead plaintiff's expert witness in 3 of those cases was a Dr. Sarah Thomas, a water quality specialist whose academic credentials mysteriously appeared 15 years ago. Sarah Chambers. Catherine breathed. She changed her identity, used her expertise to fight them legally. Exactly. And she's winning. Meridian has lost over $300 million in settlements. That's why they're so desperate to prevent anyone from connecting Sarah Thomas to Sarah Chambers, and to the evidence her family gathered here. As Nate's flight was called for boarding, he pressed a final thumb drive into Catherine's hand. This contains everything: the water testing data, Sarah Thomas's court testimonies, facial recognition matches confirming her identity. My colleague is expecting it if anything happens to me? What do you mean, if anything happens to you? His smile was grim. Let's just say my job offer in Seattle came too conveniently timed with my discovery. I'll be watching my back. Catherine watched him disappear down the jetway, then turned to find herself face to face with David Chen. His presence in the Phoenix airport was no coincidence. "You're following me," she stated flatly. David's expression remained unreadable. Not following. Protecting. There's a difference. Protecting me from what? Or is it protecting yourself? Both. He gestured toward the exit. We should talk somewhere private. What I'm about to tell you connects everything. The Chambers family, Meridian Mining, and your sister's breakdown. In David's Tesla, driving along the desert highway back toward Copper Canyon, he finally revealed his full involvement. My father was Meridian's legal counsel in 1999. He was the one who facilitated the cover-up of the toxic dumping, falsified permits, bribed officials, the whole operation. Catherine stared at him in shock. You've known all this time? I discovered it accidentally when I was interning at the county office. Found documents with my father's signature authorizing the transport of mining equipment that was actually barrels of toxic waste. When the Chambers family disappeared, I connected the dots. But I was just a teenager. My father. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He died of liver cancer 3 years later. The same cancer that's been killing people in Copper Canyon at 10 times the national average. Why come forward now? Because Meridian is coming back to clean up their mess. Not out of responsibility, but because they need access to those old mines. There's lithium down there, essential for electric vehicle batteries, billions of dollars worth. But they can't get to it without exposing their past crimes, unless they remove all evidence first. Including the Chambers family, Catherine said quietly. David nodded grimly. And anyone investigating them, like you. As they crested the hill overlooking Copper Canyon, David suddenly slammed on the brakes. In the distance, black smoke rose from the direction of Catherine's house. They're accelerating their timeline, he said, voice tight with urgency. We need to find the family before Meridian does. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Catherine thought of Jackson Redwater and the tribal lands where Emma had left her messages years ago. Yes, but first we need to retrieve something from my sister's house in Tucson. Something I think she's been hiding all these years. The real reason she walked away from the investigation. As David took a sharp turn toward Tucson, Catherine wondered how much deeper this conspiracy ran, and whether the truth would ever be safe to reveal. The modest apartment complex in Boulder, Colorado, seemed worlds away from the Arizona desert. Catherine studied the name beside the buzzer. Tyler Thomas. Not Tyler Chambers, but the age, physical description, and educational background matched what the now 30-year-old son of the missing family would have. David waited in the car, keeping watch, while Catherine approached the door alone. If you're invested in this investigation, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us continue uncovering stories that powerful interests want kept hidden. When the door opened, Catherine found herself face to face with a young man whose features echoed John Chambers. The same thoughtful eyes, the same slight furrow between the brows when concentrating. Recognition flickered. Across his face, then caution. You're Catherine Monroe, he said quietly. My parents warned me you might find us eventually. Inside the apartment, Tyler's life appeared remarkably normal. engineering textbooks on shelves, rock climbing gear in the corner, photos of friends on hiking trips. Nothing suggested a man who had spent his childhood in hiding. "We weren't kidnapped, if that's what people think," Tyler said, pouring coffee with steady hands. "We witnessed a crime, reported it through proper channels, and then discovered those channels were corrupted. Dad made the decision to disappear that night when men in unmarked vehicles began following us from the campsite." "Where are your parents now? Your sister?" Catherine asked. Tyler's expression revealed nothing. "Safe. Separated. It was safer that way. Harder to find us all at once." He retrieved a weathered journal from a locked drawer, opening it to reveal John Chambers' meticulous notes. Soil samples, GPS coordinates, photographs of men unloading barrels into abandoned mine shafts. The final entry read, "Evidence submitted to EPA returned inconclusive. Someone has compromised the testing process. SE believes we're being watched. No choice now but to implement emergency plan." "Dad was always prepared," Tyler explained. "He'd worked on enough environmental impact studies to know how corporations like Meridian operated. He'd created contingency identities for all of us years earlier, just in case a project he was working on ever turned dangerous." "And the compound in the desert?" Catherine asked. "A monitoring station. We built it gradually over years, using it to document the spread of contamination. Mom's been using the data in her court cases, anonymously, through intermediaries. The evidence from Copper Canyon is what's been winning cases against Meridian in other states." Catherine leaned forward. "Tyler, the drone footage exposed the compound. Meridian knows it's there now. They're coming back to reopen the mines. For the lithium." "We know." His expression hardened. "That's why Emma activated the contingency plan." "What contingency plan?" "She purposely manipulated the environmental drone's flight path that day. She wanted the compound to be found, because it's time for the truth to come out. The documentation is complete. The evidence is irrefutable, but we needed someone we could trust to bring it forward." His gaze held hers. "Emma always said if anyone could expose the truth, it would be you." Catherine thought of the cryptic note Emma had left years ago. "Tell Catherine Monroe. She'll know what to do." "But why trust me? I was barely a journalist when you disappeared." "Because of your sister. She was the only investigator who couldn't be bought or scared off until they broke her." Tyler's voice softened. "Mom has followed your career. She knows you're like your sister, someone who doesn't let go of the truth." From his closet, Tyler retrieved a waterproof case containing hard drives, paper documents, and carefully preserved soil samples. 18 years of evidence documenting Meridian's environmental crimes and their devastating health impacts on the community. "Take this to someone you trust at the federal level, not local, not state. Everyone in Arizona has been compromised." He hesitated, then added, "I'll contact my family. It's time for us to decide whether to come forward publicly." As Catherine left, Tyler pressed something into her hand. A small carved stone coyote. "From Emma. She said you'd understand what it means." Catherine did. In the desert folklore of the region, the coyote was the trickster who revealed hidden truths, the creature who could slip between worlds unseen. Outside, Catherine found David's car empty, the driver's door ajar. On the windshield was a printed photograph of Catherine's sister Maria entering a psychiatric facility. Scrawled across it in red marker, "Keep digging and she'll never leave." Catherine's phone rang. An unknown number. "Ms. Monroe." A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. "This is Sarah Chambers. It's time we met. But first, you need to understand what happened to your sister. Go to Maria now. Tell her Thunder Canyon runs clean. She'll know what it means." The line went dead, leaving Catherine with a critical choice. Pursue Sarah Chambers, or go to her sister. And where was David? Had he fled? Or had something more sinister happened to him? The answers, Catherine suspected, all converged at the same point. what had happened in Thunder Canyon 18 years ago, and who had enough power to bury it for so long. The Sonoran Wellness Center stood on the outskirts of Tucson, its adobe walls and healing garden designed to soothe troubled minds. Catherine hadn't visited her sister here in over a year, their relationship too strained by Maria's refusal to discuss the case that had broken her. But now, with Tyler's evidence and Sarah Chambers' cryptic message, Catherine had no choice. Before we continue down this dark path, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you're finding this investigation as disturbing as it is important. Maria sat in the garden, her once sharp features softened by medication, her former detective's intensity dimmed to a distant wariness. At the sight of Catherine, she tensed visibly. "I know you've been investigating again," Maria said without greeting. "They've already been here to warn me." "Who's been here, Maria?" "Sheriff Blackwood." Two men in suits who didn't give their names but flashed Meridian Mining security badges. Her hands trembled slightly. "They said you'd end up like me if you kept pushing. Or worse." Catherine sat beside her sister, taking her cold hands. "Maria, I need to ask you something. What does Thunder Canyon Runs Clean mean to you?" The change was immediate and shocking. Maria's vacant expression sharpened, her posture straightened, the fog seeming to lift from her mind. She glanced around the garden, then leaned close to Catherine's ear. "It means the monitoring system is still operational," she whispered. "It means Sarah's still collecting the data." "You knew?" Catherine pulled back, staring at her sister in disbelief. "All this time you knew they were alive?" Maria's smile was sad but clear, clearer than Catherine had seen in years. "I found them 3 months into the investigation. Followed the same trail you've been tracking. But when I realized what they'd uncovered about Meridian," she shook her head. "Some truths are too dangerous. I made a choice to protect them. And to protect you, by extension." "Your breakdown, it was fake?" "Not entirely. The guilt, the pressure, the threats, those were real enough. But checking myself in here was strategic. A detective who suffered a mental collapse over an unsolved case isn't a credible threat to anyone. It gave me a safe place to monitor the situation from a distance." Maria led Catherine to her room, unlocked a hidden compartment in her desk, and withdrew a thumb drive. "I've been documenting everything for years. Patient privileges mean they can't search my room without cause, and my confused state means no one takes me seriously when I occasionally ramble about corporate conspiracies." The thumb drive contained years of correspondence between Maria and Sarah Chambers, detailed maps of the contamination's spread, and medical records showing cancer clusters that perfectly aligned with groundwater flow from the toxic dumping sites. "The most damning evidence is this," Maria said, pulling up a video file. "Sarah managed to capture this 3 months before the family disappeared. The footage showed Sheriff Blackwood, then Deputy Blackwood, accepting an envelope from a Meridian executive beside an unmarked truck near the mine entrance. The same truck was later shown unloading barrels into the mine shaft. He was on their payroll from the beginning," Maria explained. "When John Chambers reported what he'd seen, his complaint went straight to the man being paid to ignore it." "Why didn't the family take this evidence and run? Go public from somewhere safe?" Catherine asked. "Because of the scope of the contamination," Maria replied grimly. "It wasn't just the mines. Meridian had been dumping toxic waste across the entire watershed for years. The cancer rates in Copper Canyon are just the beginning. If the aquifer becomes fully contaminated, it could affect water supplies across 3 states. They needed to stay and document it, build a case so overwhelming it couldn't be buried or discredited." Catherine's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "David Chen is safe. Meet at Thunder Canyon Overlook, midnight. Bring your sister. It's time to end this. S." As they prepared to leave the wellness center, Maria hesitated. "Catherine, there's something you should know about Dad." "What about him?" "He was the geologist who first discovered the lithium deposits under Thunder Canyon 30 years ago. He sold the survey rights to Meridian, never knowing they'd use the abandoned mines for toxic dumping. When I started investigating the Chambers disappearance, I found his name on the original mineral rights documents. Catherine felt the ground shift beneath her. Dad knew? Worse. When he realized what Meridian had done with his discovery, he helped the Chambers family disappear. That's why he never talked about my breakdown. Why he avoided the case entirely. He was protecting them, and his own role in what happened. The sisters drove toward Thunder Canyon in silence, each processing betrayals and secrets from different angles. As they rounded the curve toward the overlook, Catherine spotted multiple vehicles parked in the shadows. A black SUV, David Chen's Tesla, an old pickup truck with tribal nation plates, and a nondescript sedan she didn't recognize. Standing at the edge of the canyon, silhouetted against the rising moon, was a woman in her 50s. With a familiar, determined stance, Sarah Chambers, emerging from 18 years in hiding to finally tell her story. But they weren't alone. As Catherine and Maria approached, another vehicle pulled up. Sheriff Blackwood's patrol car, lights off, moving with deliberate slowness toward the gathering. "He's not coming alone," Maria whispered, reaching instinctively for the service weapon she no longer carried. Meridian's security team has been shadowing him all week. The confrontation, 18 years in the making, was about to unfold on the very ground that had been poisoned by corporate greed, with the lives of the Chambers family, the health of an entire region, and the sisters' own survival hanging in the balance. Would the truth finally emerge from the toxic shadows, or would those who had buried it once succeed in silencing it permanently? The desert night air carried the scent of creosote and sage as Catherine and Maria approached the gathering at Thunder Canyon Overlook. Sarah Chambers stood resolute, flanked by a tall man with gray-streaked hair, John, and a younger woman with fierce, intelligent eyes who could only be Emma. David Chen hovered nearby, sporting a bruised jaw, but otherwise unharmed. Jackson Redwater stood slightly apart, a silent guardian. If you've been following this investigation, please take a moment to like and subscribe as we reach the climactic revelations of this decades-long mystery. "You found us," Sarah said simply as the sisters approached. "Just as we knew you would." Catherine felt a strange sense of completion, facing this woman whose disappearance had shaped her career and broken her sister. "Why now? After 18 years in hiding?" "Because of this." Sarah held up a tablet displaying laboratory results. "The containment system we built is failing. The toxins are reaching the main aquifer. We've delayed the inevitable, but we can't stop it without help. Official, public intervention." The sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention to the access road, where Sheriff Blackwood's cruiser had stopped. Behind it, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows formed a blockade. "We don't have much time," John Chambers said urgently. "There's something you need to see before they get here." He led the group to a concealed path cutting down into the canyon, a narrow trail invisible from above. 50 feet below the rim, the path opened to a small cave entrance covered by an artificial rock face that swung open with the press of a hidden switch. Inside, motion-activated lights revealed a monitoring station filled with sophisticated equipment, computer servers, water testing apparatus, and walls covered with maps tracking the spread of contamination over 18 years. "This is the heart of our operation," Sarah explained. "From here, we've documented everything: the chemical composition of the waste, its movement through the groundwater, the correlation with cancer diagnoses throughout the region." "But there's more," John added, his voice heavy with significance. "Show them, Emma." Emma Chambers, now a woman of 33, activated a screen displaying a familiar signature at the bottom of a document. Edward Monroe, Catherine and Maria's father. "Your father wasn't just the geologist who discovered the lithium," Emma explained gently. "He was our first contact when we discovered the dumping. He tried to report it through official channels before we did, and faced the same stonewalling. Maria stepped forward, her eyes locked on the document. Dad knew. That's why he never talked about my investigation, why he seemed so uncomfortable whenever the Chambers case came up. Emma nodded. He provided the initial financing for our disappearance. His geological expertise helped us build this monitoring system, and in the final years before his dementia took hold, he made regular supply runs to our compound. Catherine felt her world tilting on its axis. Our father helped you disappear and never told us? Why would he keep that from his own daughters? To protect you, came a voice from the cave entrance. Standing there, supported by Tyler Chambers, was an elderly man with a shock of white hair and familiar eyes that matched Catherine's and Maria's. Dad? Catherine whispered, disbelief washing over her. Edward Monroe shuffled forward, his movements slowed by age, but his gaze sharp with purpose. I couldn't tell you. Maria was a detective, bound by oath to report what she found. And Catherine, you were a journalist committed to revealing truth. Knowing would have forced an impossible choice between your professional integrity and your safety. He eased himself onto a chair, his breathing labored. I discovered the lithium deposits and sold the rights to Meridian, believing they would develop the resource responsibly. When I learned they were using my surveys to identify abandoned mine shafts for toxic dumping, I was devastated. Those chemicals were poisoning land I'd promised my Navajo partners would never be harmed by my work. Your father approached us after we reported what we'd seen, John explained. He knew Meridian had compromised local officials. He offered us a choice: disappear and document the evidence methodically, or go public immediately and risk being discredited or worse. I helped them establish new identities, Edward continued, used my connections in the geological community to help Sarah build credentials as an environmental scientist. When Maria got too close to the truth, His voice broke. I couldn't bear to see her suffer what the Chambers had endured. I convinced her to check herself into the wellness center, where she'd be safe from Meridian's reach. Maria stared at her father, decades of questions reflected in her eyes. You let me believe I'd failed, that I'd broken under pressure. You were breaking, Maria. The closer you got to the truth, the more dangerous your position became. Meridian's people were following you. They'd already broken into your apartment once. Edward reached for his daughter's hand. I made the same choice for you that I'd made for the Chambers. Safety over truth. I'm sorry. The sound of voices and flashlight beams from above interrupted the reunion. Sheriff Blackwood and his entourage were making their way down the hidden path. We're out of time, John said urgently. The complete evidence package is already being transmitted to the EPA, FBI, and 3 major news outlets. But we need you to get your father to safety. He's the last piece of the puzzle, the witness who can connect every dot from the original mineral survey to the present day. Catherine turned to her father. All these years, you've been carrying this alone? Edward's smile was tired but relieved. Not alone, just in silence. But silence kills, Catherine. Not just people, but justice. It's time for the truth to echo through these canyons. As footsteps approached the cave entrance, the group moved toward a second exit at the back of the monitoring station, a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the canyon network. But Catherine and Maria exchanged a glance of silent communication and mutual decision. They would not run, not this time. With the full evidence in hand and broadcasts already in progress, the moment had come to face Sheriff Blackwood and the forces behind him, to break 18 years of silence with the full, resounding truth. The sisters stood shoulder to shoulder, their father between them, as the cave entrance filled with the silhouettes of men whose power to intimidate had just expired. The final confrontation had arrived, but who would emerge from this cave victorious remained to be seen. The Copper Canyon Community Center buzzed with tension as residents filled every seat, lined the walls, and spilled out into the parking lot. 4 days had passed since the confrontation at Thunder Canyon, 4 days that had transformed a quiet desert town into the epicenter of national attention. News vans crowded the main street, FBI agents conducted interviews in the diner, and environmental teams in hazmat suits had become a common sight around the old mining areas. If you've been with us through this entire investigation, please take a moment to like and subscribe as we approach the conclusion of this remarkable story. On the stage sat the Chambers family, together in public for the first time in 18 years. Beside them were Catherine and Maria Monroe, their father Edward in a wheelchair between them. Sheriff Blackwood was notably absent, currently in federal custody along with 3 Meridian mining executives. The town mayor, visibly uncomfortable, called the meeting to order. We've gathered today to address the situation that has come to light regarding Meridian Mining's activities in our region and the return of the Chambers family, he began, his voice unsteady. The crowd's reaction was sharply divided. Many faces showed shock and betrayal, learning that neighbors they'd trusted had been part of a conspiracy of silence for nearly 2 decades. Others displayed vindication. Those who had lost family members to rare cancers now had confirmation of what they'd long suspected. Sarah Chambers approached the microphone first, her composure remarkable for someone who had lived in hiding for so long. "We didn't choose to disappear," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "That choice was made for us when we discovered Meridian Mining dumping toxic waste that was poisoning your water, your land, your children. We tried to report it through proper channels. We were threatened. Our evidence was destroyed." She gestured to the screen behind her, where images appeared showing the extensive monitoring system the family had built. "We didn't abandon Copper Canyon. We've been its guardians, documenting the contamination, filtering what we could from the groundwater, and building a case strong enough to finally hold Meridian accountable." John Chambers stepped forward next. "I know some of you feel betrayed that we didn't come forward sooner, but we had to gather irrefutable evidence that couldn't be buried by Meridian's lawyers or discredited by bought officials. That evidence now exists, thanks to 18 years of meticulous documentation." Emma Chambers, now a poised environmental scientist in her own right, detailed the findings: cancer rates 300% above national averages, soil contamination extending miles beyond the dump sites, and groundwater showing toxic levels of heavy metals and industrial chemicals flowing toward the town's water supply. Tyler, standing slightly apart, addressed the uncomfortable question many were thinking. "We understand you're wondering who knew we were alive, who helped us. Those people took enormous risks to protect both us and you. They didn't maintain silence out of deception, but out of the same fear that forced our family into hiding." The meeting grew heated as accusations flew. Some residents demanded to know which neighbors had been part of the secret network. Others called for immediate relocation of the entire town. A group of tribal representatives spoke about the sacred nature of the land that had been desecrated and demanded not just cleanup, but restoration. Catherine watched the community fracture along lines of knowledge, complicity, and victimhood. As a journalist, she recognized this moment as just the beginning of a long, painful process toward healing and justice. When her turn at the microphone came, she addressed not just the town, but the cameras broadcasting to a national audience. The Chambers family's story is extraordinary in its details, but tragically common in its essence. Across America, corporations make calculations every day, weighing profits against human lives, measuring success in quarterly returns rather than generational health. The difference here is that one family refused to be silenced. One community harbored a secret resistance, and the truth, though delayed, has finally emerged. The most emotional moment came when Edward Monroe, Catherine and Maria's father, asked to speak. Helped to the microphone by his daughters, his frail voice nonetheless commanded complete silence. "I bear responsibility for what happened here," he said, each word deliberate. Wamamadur for Sekonaidur Haita Sanford. My geological surveys enabled Meridian to find both the lithium deposits they coveted and the abandoned mine shafts where they hid their poisons. When I discovered their betrayal, I helped the Chambers disappear rather than fighting openly. I chose secrecy over transparency, even with my own daughters. He turned to Catherine and Maria, tears streaming down his weathered face. Santitoid, I failed to trust my children with the truth, believing I was protecting them. But secrets corrode the soul just as surely as Meridian's chemicals have corroded this land. Forgiveness isn't something I have the right to ask for, from my daughters or from this town. But the truth, finally spoken, might begin to heal what silence has wounded. As the meeting continued into the night, the Chambers family faced a barrage of questions about their years in hiding, their separate lives under assumed identities, and whether they would now reclaim their original names and lives. Sarah's answer resonated deeply with Catherine. We can't go back to who we were before. None of us can. The people we were died 18 years ago in that desert. Who we've become, the work we've done, the lives we've built. That's real, too. Going forward means integrating both truths, both identities. After the meeting, as the crowd slowly dispersed into the warm desert night, Catherine found herself standing with the complete Chambers family and her own reunited family. Two groups forever linked by secrets, now exposed to the harsh light of truth. "What happens now?" she asked, the question directed at everyone and no one. Emma, who had reached out to Catherine through the drone footage that broke the case open, smiled with weary determination. Now comes the hardest part. Justice isn't just exposure. It's accountability, remediation, healing. The story doesn't end with the revelation. That's just the first chapter of the recovery. As federal agents approached to continue their interviews and environmental teams called with new testing results, Catherine realized Emma was right. The mystery of the vanishing family had been solved, but the impact of their reappearance was just beginning to unfold. For the town, for the environment, and for two families forever changed by choices made in the crucible of impossible circumstances. The final chapter of this story would not be written in dramatic confrontations, but in the long, challenging work of restoring what had been poisoned, not just the land, but trust itself. 1 year later, Catherine Monroe stood at the edge of Thunder Canyon, watching as environmental remediation crews worked methodically across the landscape. The autumn sun cast long shadows across land that was slowly healing, both from toxic contamination and from the scars of secrecy that had divided a community. If this story has impacted you as deeply as it has me, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your engagement helps ensure stories like this continue to be told. Her article series, The Family That Vanished, had won a Pulitzer Prize, brought down a corrupt sheriff's department, forced a corporate giant into the largest environmental settlement in American history, and reunited a family that had sacrificed everything to expose the truth. But for Catherine, the most significant outcome was more personal. Standing beside her was her sister Maria, now restored to the sharp, determined woman she had been before the case broke her. "They're finishing the new monitoring station today," Maria said, pointing to a modern facility near the canyon's edge. State-of-the-art equipment, transparent data reporting directly to the EPA, and an independent citizen oversight committee. The Chambers family had made different choices about their futures. John and Sarah, after testifying in the criminal trials against Meridian executives and Sheriff Blackwood, had chosen to maintain their alternate identities, continuing their environmental work in other communities threatened by corporate pollution. Emma had reclaimed her birth name, becoming the public face of a new environmental watchdog organization funded by the settlement money. Her childhood journals and photographs, meticulously maintained during their years in hiding, had become part of a traveling exhibition about corporate accountability and environmental justice. Tyler had merged his identities, using both his engineering skills and his unique perspective as someone who had lived off-grid to design sustainable communities in former industrial zones. "Dad's memorial service is tomorrow," Catherine said quietly, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in hues of amber and gold. Edward Monroe had passed away 3 months earlier, finally at peace after publicly reconciling with his daughters and testifying about his role in both the original geological surveys and the Chambers family's disappearance. "Prantancy Hugh. He died with the truth spoken," Maria replied. "That's more than many get." The town of Copper Canyon itself remained deeply divided. Some residents had taken settlement money and moved away. Others had stayed, committed to the long process of healing both the land and the community. The tribal lands, once threatened by contamination, were now protected by the strictest environmental regulations in the state, with the monitoring station co-managed by tribal representatives. David Chen had transformed his tech company into a leader in environmental monitoring technology, developing the systems now being deployed throughout the region to track the cleanup progress. His father's role in the original cover-up had become part of business school ethics courses across the country. The network of townspeople who had helped the Chambers family remain hidden for 18 years had finally been acknowledged, not as conspirators, but as quiet heroes who had chosen human lives over corporate power. Their stories formed a powerful counter-narrative to the corruption that had enabled the toxic dumping in the first place. As darkness fell over the canyon, Catherine reflected on the drone footage that had broken the case open. The technological eye that had spotted what human systems had failed to see or had deliberately ignored. Emma had later revealed that she had specifically calculated when the environmental drone would be passing over and had subtly altered the compound's camouflage to make it just visible enough to be detected. Tui. Deliberate choice to bring the truth to light. When the time was right, the water's testing clean in the northern aquifer for the first time in 20 years, Maria noted, reviewing data on her tablet. The filtration system the Chambers family built actually contained much of the contamination. Without it, the damage would have been catastrophic. Catherine nodded, thinking of her recent interview with Sarah Chambers, or Dr. Sarah Thomas, as she still preferred to be called. "Sarah told me that their years in hiding gave them purpose, that they came to see themselves not as victims, fleeing danger, but as guardians standing their ground in a different way." As they walked back to their vehicles, Catherine spotted a small carved stone coyote placed on a boulder, the same symbol Emma had sent her during the investigation. In local lore, the coyote was not just a trickster, but a transformer, turning old realities into new possibilities. The mystery of the vanished family had evolved into something far more significant, a testament to how truth, though buried, finds ways to reach the surface, how secrets, though necessary in moments of danger, eventually must yield to transparency for healing to begin, and how the choice to stand witness, whether openly or from hiding, requires a courage few can imagine until tested. The Chambers family had disappeared into the desert that summer day in 1999, not as an ending, but as the beginning of a longer, more complex journey toward justice. Their reemergence had forced a community and a nation to confront uncomfortable questions about corporate power, environmental responsibility, and the true cost of silence. As Catherine drove away from Thunder Canyon, she remembered something Emma had told her. The desert appears empty to those who don't know how to look, but it's actually teeming with life just beneath the surface. Truth works the same way. It never truly vanishes. It just waits for someone persistent enough to uncover it. If this story has moved you as it has moved me, please remember that there are countless other environmental justice stories still waiting to be told. Other families fighting powerful interests. Other communities bearing the toxic burden of corporate greed. Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below, because acknowledging these stories is the first step toward ensuring they end with justice, not silence.